Hello and welcome to the Art Class Curator podcast. I am Cindy Ingram, your host and the founder of Art Class Curator and the Curated Connections Library. We're here to talk about teaching art with purpose and inspiration, from the daily delights of creativity to the messy mishaps that come with being a teacher. Whether you're driving home from school or cleaning up your classroom for the 15th time today, take a second, take a deep breath, relax those shoulders, and let's get started. Welcome back to the Art Class Curator podcast. This is Cindy Ingram, and today I have again with me Jennifer Easterling. Hi, Jen.
Hi, glad to be here.
Well, this is, I think, your fourth time on the podcast. Eventually, I'm going to have to stop keeping count for every single episode because you're becoming a fixture of the podcast. And then for those of you who haven't met Jenn yet on the podcast, if this is your first time to listen, Jenn works for Art Class Curator as our education manager, and she creates most of the resources for our membership, the Curated Connections Library. And she's a brilliant teacher and brilliant creative mind. So there you go. Hi. So today we're going to do another art conversation. And in the past, we did one on Sharon Neshat's Rebellious Silence. And today we're going to talk about Pablo Picasso's Guernica, because both of us had really strong, powerful reactions to it that I feel like we could have a really interesting conversation about this work, what it taught us, and its importance in history as well. So why don't you tell us about your experience seeing it?
Yeah, sure. So I took a group of students to Spain in March of 2020, and we happened to be there right before everything shut down and as everything was shutting down. And it'd been a lifelong dream to go see this painting. And whenever I found out that we were going to be in the same city, I made a point to go over there. So I actually took another student and teacher with me, and we kind of ditched the group for a little while to make sure we went and saw this painting. And it's funny because we looked all over the museum for it. And, here we are traipsing across Madrid, trying to find the museum in the middle of Europe at night with weird stuff going on around the world, all kind of like that weird turmoil in the background that you're not really sure what all is going on.
Yeah.
Now we all know what was going on and why and everything else, looking back, almost a year and a half later. But I just felt this need that I had to go see it. And we finally get to the museum, and then we can't find the painting. It's really funny. We just go on this whole adventure trying to find this massive, massive painting. And for whatever reason, we can't find it. But then
I had the exact same experience. I couldn't find
hilarious.
it.
I mean, You think it would be front and center, right there, but no, we had to wind our way. Yeah. Anyway, we got to see some other cool stuff that we would have missed in the otherwise. But anyway, so we come around the corner, and of course it is huge, and the whole vibe in the museum and in that room just changed. It's one of those things that you really can't explain. It was just a whole vibe change that you feel. And there were quite a few people in there. You could still get up and see it, kind of have your one-on-one experience with it without the Mona Lisa where there's people everywhere and you have to fight them. You didn't have to do that, but there were quite a few people in there. And there were several museum guards in there, and they were very adamant that you were not very loud. And I kept finding that odd that they kept shushing everybody. You could have a quiet conversation, but if it got too loud, they were shushing everybody and really adamant you didn't take pictures. And I mean, it was maybe that added to the whole vibe of it, but it was very overwhelming and kind of that sense of, oh, there it is. Wow. Okay, it is huge. I'd always heard that it was a large painting, but I didn't realize just how big. And it's, I guess I have those emotional reactions because the same time I had the first real work of art that I saw and recognized was Botticelli, Birth of Venus and Primavera, and they were huge, side by side on these walls, and just whoa. It was kind of that same reaction of, whoa, this is huge. You don't realize until you're face to face with it. And man, you got to see all the details in it, and then the pictures online just don't do it justice because there's so much more depth in it than what you see in a photograph. And even though it is black and white and all the different values, there is just, it's again, it's hard to explain until you are seeing something in person versus a small picture online.
Yeah, I looked up the dimensions while you were talking, so I can get them exactly right. But the painting is 11 foot 6 inches by 25 feet 6 inches.
And it is
So
the only thing in
massive.
this room. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and when I saw it, there were other things. There were drawing, like the sketches leading up to it, like the sketches that he did in advance, which were actually devastating. I'll talk about my experience in a little bit too. But
well, we got to see those when they came to Houston, and
wow.
I thought Guernica was actually in Houston, and I was so excited. I was going to go see it. I drugged my husband, and I was very, very pregnant and didn't care. I was going to go see it, and it wasn't there. It was just the sketches and like everything leading up, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool, but where's the painting?" And then it dawned on me. Then I found out it doesn't leave Spain anymore, and I was like, "Oh, okay. So I guess I have to go to Spain." Well, I finally did.
Yeah, it was always a bucket list item for me too. And so I went to see it in 2017. And spring break, my husband and I went to Italy. It was the first time my husband went overseas, which was really exciting. Well, for me to take him, he was less excited. He's not as much of a traveler. So anyway, we found these super cheap tickets to Italy. It was round trip. It was like $400 round trip. And we were really excited. But the caveat was, on the way there, we had a layover in Madrid for 24 hours. And I was like, well, this is a perfect scenario for me because I had very top of my bucket list was to see Guernica. And so we had just flown across the sea, and we arrived in Madrid, I think in early morning. Was it early morning? Yeah, it was, and then our flight was out early morning the next day. And so we had that day in Spain, but it was we were so tired from being jet lagged. So we went straight from the airport to the Reina Sofia Museum in Madrid. And I don't know where our bags were. We must have dropped them off somewhere. We didn't have our bags. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm just like, we can happen to the bags. So the goal that day was to go to see Guernica first, because I knew I needed to be fresh for that. And then we were going to go, I wanted to go to the Prado too, because the Prado, obviously you have to go there. So, but we went to see Guernica, had the same experience, couldn't find the painting. We're just like, I kept going to guards going, Guernica, and pointing, and they would just point me the way. And yeah, I entered that space. And I was expecting it to be emotional. I am prone to emotional experiences in front of paintings. It's a thing that happens to me. So I was expecting that. I was expecting it more to be the feeling of, wow, I can't believe I get to see this, and how cool it is in person and how big it is. And I was expecting all of that. But what I did not expect was to be totally devastated by it. Like, it was, and I'm tearing up just saying that right now, because it was like, it wasn't this beautiful work of art. It was this wow, this beautiful work of art, but look at the death and the devastation and the pain and the horror and the terror and like the pain of the painting, and then all of the sketches around it. Like, I could not even like function. I was like, it was so painful. I almost like couldn't look at it. I kept having to like go and look away, which is really weird, because usually when I'm having a connection with the painting, I like can't look away. But this one, like, I had to look away, or I was devastating of a painting. Yeah. So, and I can tell you once we get into the conversation, like what exactly I was making a lot of connections. But let's talk about the painting, like just describe it for people who are listening who might not have seen it. I'm sure if you're an art teacher, you've seen this painting 100%, but we might have some people who have not. So let's describe it. You want to start?
Sure. So what we have is, like I said, a very large black and white painting, and it's not realistic. It's your abstraction, and kind of what Picasso is known for is abstracting figures. And he has added these figures and animals that are in such pain and devastation. Like, the more you look at them, you see just pain. I mean, you just see that the pain, the anxiety, the worry, the fear, all of it on each figure. And the way he has posed each figure, you feel for him. And I find myself putting, myself in that figure's, I guess, kind of persona, or, like I can identify with this figure, and then I move over to the next one and I can identify with that one. And, just going from figure to figure, putting myself in, I guess, the shoes of each one. But I mean, how many figures do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 human type figures. And one of those is it looks to be like a baby who's died, and the mother is holding it, just wailing in pain. You've got someone else who looks like he's being stepped on by a horse. That horse also looks like they're in pain. And actually, I just see now it looks like he might be being stabbed. I've never seen that.
Yeah, he has like a stab in his side, and then he has like a spear or something coming through his top.
Point, yeah.
But there's something coming out of his mouth too, but always wonder if that's the tongue or if that's like another spiky thing.
Yeah, but in the way he's posed, he looks like he's stepping on what could be this dead body, of someone, of a figure.
And that figure is decapitated.
Yeah,
and the arms chopped off.
Yeah,
there's no body. It's just 2 arms and a head.
Yeah, just the limbs, and it's gripping a broken sword down there at the bottom.
Yeah,
and then you have another. Looks like a woman like rushing in, seeing all this. And she looks almost bewildered. And then right above her, you have this, it's almost, I keep thinking ghost-like figure, but it's not, because then you see the arm reaching through this window holding a candle, and you see the worried expression on their face.
Yeah, and the woman at the bottom, the one that you were talking about who looked bewildered, her leg is swollen. Like, it almost feels to me like it's trapped and it's getting swollen, and she's trying to like
maybe get out,
but that's always how I'm reading it, is like her leg is super heavy, it's trapped under something, it's
she's injured in some way. Well, and if you look back at the shapes, you see this like triangle shape that melds into her legs. So as soon as you said it looks like it's trapped, I started seeing that, and that kind of just changed my whole perspective on it.
Yeah. And then we have one person who's like, I envision them in a trash can of flames. I mean, they're in some sort of something with flames coming out of it.
And you see their arms reaching up, for help or trying to get out or something. Yeah. And then right above it is like a house that could be on fire or something, with the idea of flames.
And then we have 2. So we have the horse. We also have a bull. And the bull doesn't have as much painful things happening to it. It just seems to be in shock. Yeah. And then there's a bird as well, kind of in the background.
And the bird looks in pain, which the bird is hard to see. And I don't think I ever really saw it until I zoomed in or was sitting there in person. And I was like, oh, because it's done in a dark gray background with black lines. So it really fades into the back. And that's where, like, once you zoom in, so if you are near a computer, you can go to the Reina Sofia's website and go to Guernica and be able to zoom in a lot closer than some other images and see more details. But yeah, there's stuff that I hadn't seen before until I was able to stand in front of it or zoom in and really see the different details that pop out.
So I'm going to mention a few other things that are here. The head and arm that are coming through the doorway that looked like a ghost, she/he is holding they are holding a candle. And then there's also this incandescent light bulb at the top that is lit, but also has this eyeball shape around it as well. And then I think those are all and then, there's the man holding the broken sword. There's a flower coming out of his hand as well, like just a line drawing of a flower. And I think those are the main things. So this painting was created in 1939, I believe, from the World's Fair. And Picasso was supposed to do a painting for the World's Fair for the Spanish Pavilion. And the theme of the World's Fair was like technology or something like that. And like, new technology, the impact of technology in society.
Celebrating modern technology.
Yeah, all of that. But then this event happened where Hitler bombed this town of Guernica. and basically destroyed it. And it was this senseless act. It didn't make any sense why he would be bombing it. And it was part of the Spanish Civil War.
Well, and it was bombing practice for Hitler's new war machine that he had made. And so it was the first time that a town had been like, and civilians had been bombed like that, and had this like aerial blanket bombing, especially over a civilian population. Nothing like this had ever happened before. But basically, Franco, who had been in charge, kind of just picked a town and was like, yeah, you can take that one. And Hitler came in and just bombed it just for practice. And it just caught everybody off guard and destroyed the town. This is like 1,600 people were killed or wounded, and the whole city burned for 3 days. And, even like he had kind of the blanket bombers come over and bomb it. And then like these aerial fighters just came in and started shooting down any civilians that were running. So just absolute terror and just senseless act of death.
Yeah.
And it just knots in my stomach anytime I read about it.
Yeah, you were talking just like my whole body covered in chills. Like, oh,
I know. Same.
So Picasso, it's funny because Picasso was not a political painter. Like all of his paintings, and this is late in his career, he had been a, painter for dozens, decades by this point. And everything is, women and children, still life, a lot of paintings of women, household scenes, abstraction. Like his paintings were more about the painting style and the form and seeing that develop rather than sort of these big political messages. But it was like a breaking point for him. He realized he couldn't stay silent. He realized he couldn't just paint something about technology when this horrible thing had just happened in his homeland. And so he painted Guernica in response to that event and put that up in the Spanish exposition instead of, what he had been commissioned to do.
Well, and something interesting too. So the World Expose or whatever, it was in Paris, and Spain had its pavilion, and they displayed art and all that kind of stuff. And here's Guernica that comes in as this huge political message. Well, it was also not too far from Germany's pavilion, and Albert Speer, who was Hitler's architect, he had done some big something in response. This is monolith to Nazi Germany. So here we have this. Yeah, I know when I read that, I was like, oh my goodness.
I didn't know about that.
Imagine, yeah. I didn't either until I read that, and I was like, wow. I mean, what a push and pull and irony and all that. And what a message sitting right there in front of him.
Yeah, so the beginning, I just looked this up too. I said 1939 earlier. I was wrong. It was 1937. This was July 1937. World War II officially began September 1st, 1939. So it was 2 years before the official beginning of World War II.
And the Spanish Civil War was still going on.
Yeah.
But Franco and Hitler had kind of partnered up. And it was funny because I was reading about the reactions, and Russia, who was normally in favor of the Republic and against the Spanish Republic and against Franco and his regime, they had such a strong negative reaction. Like everybody had negative reactions to this painting. Like, what are you doing? Like, this is not how you're supposed to paint. You're supposed to paint, really realistic things or whatever. And it's interesting to see how all of his pain and emotions transformed into this. And I feel like this, even though it is an abstraction, that I have more gut-wrenching feelings toward this than other realistic paintings that, I think like the 3rd of May, where they've, it's much more realistic, and Goya has painted, the firing squad and all that. But I have more of a gut reaction with this, and with those sharp angles and the weird pain. Because you think about pain, if you've ever truly been in pain, anguish, whatever, it's not pretty. You talk about those ugly cries and, just the horrors of war. And I see that and I feel that in this painting where I don't so much in other ones. And so I thought that was really interesting, that even though people were like against what was happening, they were still kind of against the painting, even with the message that it was bringing out.
Yeah. And I think it's true for me, although I do tend to respond more to, I tend to respond more to abstract art than to realistic art, just in general. But this one in particular, when you look at a reproduction of it, you do see the pain, you see everything in it. But seeing it in person, I noticed for the first time the connection to the artist. Like I could feel him move. I could feel him moving in front of that paint. I could feel him painting. I could see like there were drips of paint. There were translucent areas where you could see what he had tried before underneath it. You could, it was thick in some places and thin in the others. And so like you could see like the slashing of his movements. Like you could feel his energy in that room.
Yeah.
You could feel his anger. You could just, it was just so palpable. Like the present, like the air in front of it. And I'm wondering if that's why the guards made you be quiet, because it was like, it was sacred, and it was like a holy place, just that room.
Yeah.
It was bigger than the painting, and the painting was so big, but it was just, it extended beyond the surface.
Yeah, it really does. And you don't get that in just a photograph.
Yeah, I have it on my monitor as big as I can get it. And it's like, oh, no, it's not big enough.
I know. I keep trying to zoom into different places and it doesn't do it justice.
And I wanted to take zoomed in shots while I was there, but they wouldn't let me take pictures.
I know. Same. Same. I was so disappointed at that. I was like, oh, I got to take this to my students.
Yeah. Okay, so we have this painting, and we both had these sort of strong connections to it. And one of the things we often talk about at Art Class Curator is the personal connection that you get with the work of art, that it's not just about the history. It's not just about the artist. It's not just about what's in the painting. It's about what it reminds you of in your own life and what you can learn from it. So you said you were seeing this, at the very beginning of the pandemic. How did that experience impact your experience of this artwork?
Yeah. So whenever I saw it, it had to have been March 10th, I believe. And everything shifted and changed. We got the message, as everything was shutting down, that they were going to, the President Trump at the time had made the announcement that they were closing the borders and we had to be home, or everybody had to be back in the United States by midnight. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get back in on March 13th. So I saw it right as all that was happening. And, I had that, I kept seeing pandemic stuff. So I knew the story behind it. I'd researched it before. And so I knew what the painting was actually created in response to initially. But whenever I was looking at it, I couldn't help but put all this idea of like pandemic stuff in there. And now, especially like after the fact and like all that went on in the world, I keep seeing that. And especially like the mother holding her dead baby. And I have two girls of my own and they were, younger at the time. And when I was standing there in front of it, I kept going back to that. And I was like, if something were to happen to my babies, like that would be me, that's where my eye just kept going. I kept trying to look at everything else and it just kept going there and having these gut wrenching, my heart being ripped out of my chest of like, oh, if something were to happen, like there I am. So yeah, so we saw it there, and then everything, like I said, we got this crazy call, and we had these huge panics, and here I am, in Spain with all these students thinking, how am I supposed to get back? And, how are we supposed to get back safely? And, just the panic and the worry and the stress, and like, oh, I see all that. Oh my goodness, I have all these other connections to it. But also, one thing that I noticed is even though, we were everyone was kind of panicking, people back home and people there, what's going to happen in the next 24, 48 hours? And are we going to get stuck? And, can we make flights? Are we going to get sick and die? Are we going to bring all this illness back with us? Just all that just kept compounding. While we were in the midst of that panic and just kind of waiting to find out what was going to happen, a couple of my parents who were on the trip, they took the kids aside and they set up these makeshift, just like mini art camps, and brought out all these art supplies that they'd brought and used that to help calm the fears of the students. And I wanted to participate because I needed it so bad, but I was trying to take care of everything else. But I appreciated that. And I kept going back to this idea of like, how many times do we turn to art in times of adversity? Painting in reaction to something, or using it as a way to express our fears and our emotions, and calm our mind, center our, and I just thought, wow, how powerful is this? And even though like I'm looking at this painting in reaction to war, or to bombing, here we've got kids being centered by art, people being centered by, that's where we kept going back to. And I thought, oh my goodness, how powerful is that to cross, so many generations and cultures and experiences, but we keep going back to creating art. So in November of 2019, I attended a workshop at the Texas State Art Education Conference, and the presenter there shared her pretty much career-long research on artist Friedel Dicker Brandis. And Friedel was an up-and-coming artist from the Bauhaus when she was sent to Theresienstadt, a concentration camp during World War II. And the amazing thing about her is that instead of taking food, valuables, or money, she filled one of her suitcases with art supplies, or I guess her one suitcase, because they were only allowed one. And she was able to like sneak those into the camp. And in secret, she taught art to the students, or to children who were in the concentration camp or work camp. And she used that to help, keep them calm or keep them occupied, so that they weren't so focused on, all the terrible things that were going around. And I thought, what a brave, powerful statement that, this one woman, she used her talents and what she had to give hope to the children, stuck in this horrible situation. And she helped them express their emotions and fears through art. I just thought it was really cool how she turned to art in times of great adversity, and I actually got to go to Theresienstadt several years ago whenever I was in the Czech Republic. And we heard about her, and I didn't quite make the full connection at the time, but there was a museum of children's art there in the town. That was, if you don't know anything about this concentration camp, it was actually set up as this ideal town that they basically talked Jews into going. And it was going to be this kind of arts cultural center that was this model town, this model city for everything that the Nazis were doing, that, give everything you have and come to this model, wonderful cultural place that has all the best musicians and artists. And
yeah, you see those pictures from Nazi Germany of like kids playing soccer at the concentration camps, or like people dancing and having a good time. It was all just public relations. They were trying to convince the Jews that, we're not doing anything wrong here. Look how happy everyone is.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what this settlement, village, town, whatever you want to call it, was, but it was all fake. And so in just right down the road was an actual concentration camp. But it was like the model one. So anytime someone would come in to this place, or, I get whoever would come in to like make sure that the Nazis were doing all that they say they're doing, they would go to this one place and they'd be like, oh, see how wonderful it is. And there's a swimming pool and trees and a theater and all this stuff. But it was all lies, it was all propaganda and everything. And so, you can drive through the town that's still there, and then you can walk through the concentration camp. But in the town, there is a children's museum of art that children created while they were there. And one little lady, she was a child whenever she was in the camp, she was drawing and documenting, not on purpose documenting, but she was just drawing everything that she saw, as the time passed. And she somehow was able to hide all of her drawings. And you see the progression of, the health of the people that were put in that camp. And you see the guards, like you see the health go down and deteriorate, and you see the guards doing different things and all that. And she's just drawing, like just drawing. And somehow she was able to hide all of her drawings through, the course of being, at this camp. And she survived. And she took the drawings with her. And even after, long after she took all these drawings, she actually hid them under her mattress in her bedroom and would never show anybody until, because she was too scared that, something would happen to her if anybody saw them, I guess Nazis would still come back, just those fears. So finally, her grandchildren were able to convince her to, bring him out and show people, and they published him in a book. And so I bought the book, and it's incredible to see all the atrocities that were happening through a child's eyes, and they're just these honest drawings, but yet she was still turning to art, with whatever she had, even in times that, I just kept that art in times of adversity. She kept going back to that. And I find that very powerful, that people, no matter what's going on, still find a way to create and take all these emotions that they're feeling, everything they're experiencing, and put it on paper, on canvas, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, you think about it through all of time.
Mm-hmm.
There was art before there was language. There was art before, there was art before there was written language. There was art before any of it, because we just have this human desire to create. And I think about Picasso, like in that moment, and he's super problematic, and I have mixed feelings on him now, especially with like the womenizing and the all of the things wrong with Picasso. There's so many things wrong with Picasso. Like, I always have this sort of intellectual / moral / thing happen anytime I talk about his work, because to me, I don't ever really fully focus on who made the artwork that I'm responding to. I never, when I'm looking at a work of art, wonder or think about who was this artist as a person, and what led to this. Like, that's not something that I'm particularly interested in. I know a lot of people are, but that's just not something that I particularly am that interested in, because I do believe that the art is the thing that I love, the actual thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's so tricky. So I'm sure that there could be someone listening to this episode who's like, but Picasso. And I'm like, I know Picasso. I know I should probably cancel Picasso, but it's also like, his work is so powerful to me. And I've had such powerful moments with it that it's just this really sticky place. So anyway, all that aside, I do, in this case, do like to think about like what he was going through, and that desire that he had in that moment to, like, did it come from a place of wanting to express his feelings, or did it come from a place of wanting to make sure the world knew about it, like not to sweep such atrocities under the rug? Like, it was just all of these things building up in him at once, or he just couldn't take it. I mean, he finished that painting in like a month. It was like 35 days it took him to create that massive painting. And I think that's astonishing too. A big painting like that feels like it should take a lot longer. But just that moment of anger, that moment of like needing to do something, needing to act, where that your anger finally has reached a moment where it's like, I have to do something. And I think that's a really interesting moment to consider in myself, because when I looked at this painting, it was in 2017, and there was a recent, like the stuff, like the wars and stuff in Syria has been going on for many years before this, but there was some bombing in the town of Aleppo, I believe, that happened like in February or March, like right before I went, because I went in March as well as spring break. And I had been seeing on Facebook a bunch of videos of Syrian refugees like walking away from this bombing. And in one case, there was a video, and I never went to look for it again because I honestly don't want to see it again. But I do want it. I want to know so I can like fill the story to know exactly what I saw. But I just don't want to see it again. But it was a woman who was holding her child, and I think the child was dead. I'm not 100% sure. And she was just wailing, just like in the picture. And she was covered in ash. So there was not a lot of color, even, and it wasn't a black and white picture, but she was a video, but she was covered in ash. And so it just, like, that had just happened. I had just seen that. And then I go in to see Guernica, and all I could see were these videos that I had just seen. And then I also kept seeing in it the World Trade Center bombing, or not bombing, but planing. I don't, that 9/11. Like, I kept seeing I guess because of the ash and all the pictures from World Trade Centers are, it's all black and white because it's just all ash. I kept seeing that in there too. And it was just like, I was feeling the pain of those things over and over again, like that I had kind of stuffed down, because I tend to stuff down new stuff because I get too emotionally connected to it. And then I'm not functional. So I tend to shut down those sort of feelings, which is not healthy. But in that moment, it was just like, they all were there flooding in and,
Yeah. And I think it's amazing that I keep finding new connections to different things that go on. So, it's Picasso aside and Guernica aside or whatever, like the town, just the raw imagery and the emotion felt.
Mm-hmm.
I just see the connection between different things, in my life or in things going on in the world, over and over and over again. And I love that it doesn't get old, and not specifically necessarily about this one, but so many pieces in general, whatever's going on in my life or the world, somehow I start to see those connections, and it's like I'm seeing it with fresh eyes, every time, which is cool. And that's what I love about it. I just find that fascinating. And I found this cool quote by Picasso as I was, looking more at this, and it says, "A painting is not thought out and settled in advance. While it's being done, it changes as one's thoughts change. And when it's finished, it goes on changing according to the state of mind of whoever is looking at it." And I thought, how perfect is that?
Picasso, he said that. I did not know that he said that.
I didn't either. I found it on a website, and I was like,
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled because I say that all the time, and it's now in our manifesto, which I sent to the podcast a few weeks ago. But we have a line in there that says that art belongs to the viewer as much as it belongs to artists, and art changes. As art changes when we change, art expands when we expand. And I always wonder, if artists take offense to that every time I say that. I'm like, does an artist really think that? Would they agree with me? But yeah, Picasso's saying that. He's saying, once the art leaves his hands, it's not done. It keeps changing.
And I'm like, and I see that. I truly see that, and I feel that. I'm like, oh, okay, good. I don't know. It's kind of some kind of validation, I guess, for my emotions. I don't know.
Yeah, and if you go back and see it again, you're gonna have
a whole new
experience. Well, and you're gonna remember the past experience. You're gonna remember this conversation, every other thought you've had about it since, and then there's gonna be other things that have gone on in the world too that you're gonna make it. And so it's like every time you come at a painting, you're a different person, so you're gonna have a different experience. The painting also has had a life of its own there too.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure. Well, and as I was reading more about it, it said after it was painted, it went and started touring the world to kind of make everybody aware of what was happening, the atrocities that were happening in Spain. And it traveled for, I don't know, many years, 19, 20 years, something like that. And, but Picasso always intended for it to go back to Spain, to stay there and, be a part of its culture. But he also specified that it couldn't go back until Spain, I guess, was at peace. And kind of a republic was set up, or, a democratic society, whatever it was. And so it didn't get to go back. It went to New York and stayed in New York until, was it 1981? From the beginning of World War I until 1981. It was there at the Museum of Modern Art in New York until it was finally, they petitioned and they were able to bring it home to a peaceful state in Spain. And I thought that's quite a powerful statement too, just within itself.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Also, that's the year I was born, so I feel like that's relevant. It was me. It was me.
It was you.
Was it June 1st that they made this decision?
Close. October 25th. They're close.
I don't know. I had to give me time. I hadn't fully developed my art connections.
There you go.
Expertise yet. Until I was 6 months old. Wow. That's fascinating. That really is.
Yeah. Yeah, because he wanted it to be owned by the Spanish people. But he refused to let it come back. I thought that was really fascinating.
That is. There's another quote by Picasso that I really love, and you can find this on a comic on Zen Pencils. It's really good. But the last part I'm going to feature, which says, "Painting is not done to decorate apartments. It is an instrument of war for attack and defense against the enemy." So, he knew when he was painting this that this was him taking a stand. This was him doing what he could do as an artist. And I think that's a really important message. You can think about just for people in general, that I know I get to a place where something terrible is going on in the world and I feel really helpless. I want to be able to help, but I don't know what I can do. But I think it's a really good message that it's, you do what is best for you to do. So you think about what your realm of influence is. So, in my case, my realm of influence is art class curator. Like I can use art class curator in ways that can help me help in certain ways. Or, if you're, and then so he was a painter. And so his way of addressing this issue and his way of making change was to make a painting about it, because he knew that this was like the way he could use his voice. And I think that's really interesting to think about for every person. Like, what is your thing that you can do, that you can control, that where you can make your difference? And it makes you feel, I think, a little less like hopeless and helpless, and a little bit more like rooted in and grounded in what you can do.
Yeah.
Because you can't do everything.
Yeah, and we're not completely helpless. And I pulled up that comic to look at it, and I love how it's called Weapon of Choice.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was interesting. That what is your weapon of choice? Is it words? Is it painting? Is it photography or filmmaking? Or like how many people use their amazing creativity to create or to be that weapon or that that voice, that outlet to share messages with the world.
Yeah, and now that I'm looking at this comic again too, like it's so good. The images are so good. You see him like slashing with his paintbrush like it's a sword, and his mouth is wide open. He's like sweating, and you see intermittent. Every other panel is the bombing, and then every other panel is him painting the picture. And so it's really good.
Like you can, and whenever you're talking about that, like I'm standing in front of it and you see the drips and you see the drawing and the redrawing and all this stuff, like seeing this comic, I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I was envisioning as,
Yeah.
I'm imagining him, doing this painting.
Yeah, and I don't imagine him doing this sort of very calm, like methodical, like, paint a brushstroke here, paint a brushstroke here. No, he's just like attacking that canvas, and you could feel that energy.
For sure.
Like
we said before, the energy around this painting is just so different than other paintings that I've stood in front of and looked at. It's bizarre. I mean, those things that you can't quite put into words, but you're like, oh, this is cool. I don't know how to talk about it, but it's cool.
Yep. Indeed. So, we talked about our personal connections to this and how it's going to change and the history behind it. Let's talk some about like the symbolism and stuff that we see in it, because that's another thing. We have a lesson on this somewhere. I think it's on the blog that I did with my students, is they analyzed the symbols and they thought about what the symbols could represent. And, I like to preface this too with saying that Picasso, his quotes about the painting say he didn't intentionally put symbolism in there. He says, I can pull the exact quote.
I found a quote about it too, about the symbolism.
Okay, there's probably the one that I'm thinking of, so maybe read that. Yeah.
When asked to explain his symbolism, Picasso remarked, "It isn't up to the painter to define the symbols. Otherwise, it would be better if he wrote them out in so many words. The public who look at the picture must interpret the symbols as they understand them."
Yeah, that wasn't the exact quote that I was saying, but it's the exact same message. It was so he says, I'm not intentionally putting symbols in here. It's not something that I'm like intellectually thinking of, but that they're present. Just they just sort of are born of him, I think, is the idea that he said. So it's up to us to analyze what they are about. And I really like this because I do think the art belongs to the viewer. And if he just outright said everything, then I think it takes away the fun for us of exploring the artwork.
Yeah, and I think it would take away some of that connection too, because as we see it, we put our own interpretation and our own meaning, and I guess I am kind of disappointed if I go back and I read stuff and I'm like, oh, that's what that was supposed to mean, because that's not what I got. I had this whole other story and invention going on in my mind, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go back to mine. I like mine better. And that's
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. And that's an important message for students too, because, you'll have a whole conversation with students about something and then they'll be like, well, okay, what's the real answer? And I'm like, well, there isn't real. We don't know that either. We don't know the real answer or your answer is better. Or I'll tell them and I'm like, but remember that the real answer, put real in air quotes, because it's not real. Like whatever, there are multiple right answers. There are multiple real answers. There's no one right answer. So I think that is really important to help your students understand. So
For sure. Yeah.
let's talk about the animals because I was doing some research on this. So I'm writing a book. So I think I might have mentioned that on a podcast before. I'm not sure if I did, but anyway, one of the chapters is actually about Guernica. So I'm fresh on my research about it. So that's why I'm like, can pull off this random information about it. But one of the things I read was a theory that I hadn't noticed before in my looking at it was that the horse could potentially not be a good guy. I thought the horse was just having trauma like everybody else, like it got hurt by the bombing. But I started to realize that in this, there's the broken sword and the decapitated guy. And right above the broken sword is a piece of a sword stuck into the horse. So it made me think that perhaps the horse is a representation of the bombers.
Yeah.
And then also on the horse is the only place that has that like hash marked texture.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a long time when I first learned about this painting, I guess it was a teacher that told me this. It's just one of those things that have stuck in my head until the end of time. But like, or how the way they say it lives rent free. Someone told me once that was to symbolize how Picasso learned about the attack was through the newspaper. And so that's supposed to represent like the newspaper. So that could be part of it too, that it could maybe the horse could represent the media. It could be somebody else.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it because it does stand out. Well, but it's not the entire horse though either. It's just like kind of the body and 3 of the 4 legs have that hash mark. But yeah, I definitely see the newspaper connection. And if you look farther down on the far left leg, there's like some other little lines and stuff. I almost see them as like headlines now. Like my mind is totally shifting and changing to this whole newspaper kind of idea.
Yeah. And then what is that black and white thing in the middle? Because that has plagued me since the end of time.
I don't like it looks like it could be like a gash in the horse's side, but then at the same time, I almost like with the lines coming through on the white, I almost see like fingers, like
in my head, it is it is a portal to somewhere else. Like it is a hand pulling it open, and it's something like behind the painting.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I stare at that spot probably the most of any spot of this painting. Maybe because it's right in the center and my eye line too.
That is true. Well, and you got that eye-shaped light bulb right above it, or people looking to escape. Like, you think about like people who've gone through serious trauma, some that, they need that escape of, so, are you escaping in your mind? Or else maybe this is the escape portal to another realm to escape the horrors. I don't know. We could go into all kinds of things.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Well, and it looks like a ghost. Is it the ghostly figure coming out to other realms? And I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
We could explore all kinds of possibilities.
It's interesting too. Like there are some signs of hope, like the flower and the light. But I noticed when I was looking at the artwork. And I know this because I wrote about it right after I got home. I wrote a blog post about it, so I kind of know what was fresh in my mind. Is I talked about how I noticed in the drawings versus the painting, and also in there are spots in the painting when you see it in person that you can kind of see what was going on underneath, like what he had attempted and then he changed. Like you can't see it at all in the picture, and I know it existed because I just remember it, but I can't have specifics. But I did notice that there were more explicit signs of hope in the planning. Like there was more of those little bits of positiveness, but they didn't make it into the final version. They were like even that flower is like gray. Like you can barely tell it's there. So it's like he had more of that in there, but then he took it away. Like it was not, and I can see he probably did not see any signs of hope there.
Yeah.
And the bombing of a whole town, destruction of a whole town.
Well, and that flower just seems like you don't see it at first, but when you do, it seems so different from the rest of the painting. You're like, why would he include this little ghosted flower in the midst of all this other horror and devastation?
Yeah, and it's not an outdoor space, so it's not like it was a flower that was being grown and that one just happened to not get destroyed. Like I always view them as in a basement or something because there's a tiled ground and then there's walls and then there's the incandescent light bulb. That always reminds me of a basement. But then there's this door with light coming in and then like the ghost coming from kind of up high. Like I've always viewed this as basement.
Yeah, you definitely get that tight space.
Yeah.
That goes into composition of, pulling in. And I guess that helps with the tension of the whole piece as you just feel cramped with all of this going on.
Yeah. Yeah, you think about this size of a room, because we do see the corners of the room, like all of this devastation and drama is happening in this small space. Like that like subconsciously probably really adds to the intensity to the person. Like you don't necessarily know that's part of it, but it's like you can't escape this. There's no getting out of this room.
Right. And just like, you think to the people, like there was no escape for those people. Like it just happened and caught them off guard. There was no warning. And so you can see how, even though we don't really put emphasis on elements and principles, you can see them really at play in this and how an artist is taking them and using them to his advantage, whether he's intending to or not. There's a whole lot of that going on in the stark contrast of the black and the white, and you're shifting and changing constantly, and so at one moment you see this and the next moment you see something else, and seeing how all that plays off of each other.
Yeah. And the elements and principles work in this is this was just a really good one for analyzing. But you know what makes me think? I was about to start doing that, about to start thinking, oh, this is leading to the emphasis here and this is doing, but then I realized like me doing that is me doing that on this small scale in this computer screen and how I can see the whole image. I can see it. But if I was here standing in front of it, all of these people would be larger than me.
Yeah, they are.
So if it's 11 feet wide, that's like two of me laying side to side across the painting. So yeah, like my head is probably as big as that decapitated guy's head. Like this is life size.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're confronted more with these figures. They become a lot more real whenever you're seeing them face to face in life size.
It's pretty amazing thinking of him making this like such a cohesive thing when it was that big.
And yet it's not.
Right.
All the different styles and it's shifting and changing so much. Like the horse's face has a lot more of the shading where other shapes are really flat.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got the one texture, but yet it all works. Like it all goes together somehow. And maybe that's part of the chaos of it that, and that plays into your subconscious, that you've got so much chaos and you've got the cramped space and the shifting and changing. And, I think it really plays on you psychologically.
It would be a really good exercise, I think, with students is to look at all of Picasso's styles before this one. Look at his cubist work, look at his, like the Mademoiselle's painting, like all the different types of styles he did, and see how every single one of them is represented in here. You can see the progression. You can see it is like the best summary of all of his work up until now, but then infused with this extra like actual meaning and story and emotion. And so it's like he's taking everything he did before and he's taking his emotions all together to create this like masterpiece. It's like he was born to create this painting.
Yeah.
Like every moment of his life was like
building up to this.
It's just,
and what a statement. What a statement.
I mean, I think I just discounted all of his work up until this point, but it was good work. Like I've had very powerful experiences with early work too, but like, it's amazing. Okay. So I feel like we have been a little bit all over the place, but I think that's okay because this painting is
all over the place.
All over the place. So I just want to mention again, I talked about the drawings around it, but like for every character, in this painting, he did multiple sketches and drawings of them at various stages of agony. So he was experimenting with like, what is the most agony that you can do? And so seeing all of the sketches, especially the woman with the baby, and I think I also connect to her the most too, because I'm a mother. I mean, most mothers are probably going to be like, that's who you're going to be looking at. Probably fathers too. But it's like, she is just the most intense. But in the drawings leading up, it's like, I would want to look away from the painting and I'd turn around and on the wall behind me would be just her in 5 other states of agony. And it was like, it was pretty intense. Yeah.
And it's crazy to think that a painting could have that much effect on someone. Mm-hmm. You know, that gut-wrenching, just, you know, tear out your chest. Like, it's crazy.
How did the teacher that you said you were with a student and another adult, how did they respond? Do you remember?
Yes, they were both in awe. She loves art. She teaches history. So she was having the history side, but she's also taught a lot of art. And, you know, and it was her daughter. So she of course grew up with art. And, yeah, but honestly, like we talked about it afterwards, I remember, but honestly, I didn't even look at them. Once I kind of went into the room, I zoned everybody else out. And it was just like me and the painting and the guards pushing me, of course. But yeah, it's crazy. Like going back and putting myself in that room. I remember we chatted about it. I don't remember what we said, but it was just me. Like it captivated my attention so much that I kind of lost everything else that was going on around me, and it drew me in. And I always have that happen. Every once in a while it does, but specifically that one, you know, and I've gone back because I'm trying to think, where were they? I know they were there. I'm pretty sure they were there. And so, yeah, it'd be interesting to go back and talk to her now, especially being a history teacher, and get her take on it and stuff. Because I'm fascinated with any art connected with World War II somehow, whether, you know, it was painted around that time or it was stolen or whatever else. Like, I'm just fascinated by it all for some reason. And so I guess that's part of why I've been drawn to this, because it's painted in reaction to that, in reaction of what was going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went with my husband, like I said earlier, and his response was, meh. He said, it doesn't do anything for me. So his exact quotes.
Well, okay.
And I'm like, are you effing kidding me? I was like, I was sobbing. Like, I seriously, like, I stopped trying to wipe the tears at this point. Like, they just were flowing. And I was just like, how is that even possible for you to be in this room and say, meh, it doesn't do anything for me? I was just devastated. I couldn't believe it. But also, you know, he is good at looking at art. He will go to look at art with me. He'll go to museums with me. He does enjoy it. He does recognize artists, you know, especially when I worked in art museums, I would be talking about this one artist for, you know, however long the exhibit was open. So he learned a lot. But yeah, he didn't like this one.
That's cool. I was trying to remember my husband's reaction to go when we went to the show in Houston that had like all the drawings and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think he was kind of the same of like, Picasso's weird. This world is weird.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
And you know, that same day too, we were supposed to go to the Prado right after this, but I couldn't. And I was full. I could not. It was, I think, the jet lag mixed with just how emotional of an experience it was. I was like, I need to do something light. I can't go look. I'm not even going to see it if I go. So we did actually go to the Prado but I was like, I just need to see a couple things. I like ran through just to see a couple things, and it was devastating that I didn't really get to fully experience it. So that's a bucket list to go back. But we ended up going to some castle.
Oh, I'm sure it's lovely.
It was. I just could not do anything emotional.
We had to come from the Prado.
Okay.
But it was, again, that same kind of quick experience because we didn't have a lot of time. And we were supposed to have a great time at the Prado, and our guide had made up this whole scavenger hunt to send the kids through to do all these fun things. And we get there, and the guards won't let anybody take any pictures of anything. And they're like, so it's something, I don't know what it was with Spain, and they wouldn't let us talk and they wouldn't let us take pictures. And we're like, we just want to enjoy the art and you're not letting us.
Oh, was the scavenger hunt activity involved taking pictures?
Yeah. Like, you know, like acting, stand like or a sculpture or something and take a picture and send it. And they wouldn't. They were like yelling at me. They yelled at me for taking a picture out the window, not even at the art. And I was like, I'm taking a picture of something cool outside. No, I was like, okay.
Oh, museums, I swear.
But apparently that was something that had just changed, because when the guide went there like a couple weeks before, there was no issue and they could take pictures. So I don't know what changed. Maybe it was pandemic stuff. Who knows? But they were very, or they didn't want us there. I don't know. Who knows?
Oh, I feel like the photo thing was a thing when I went, because I just ran through, because I wanted to see 5th of May and I wanted to see Garden of Earthly Delights specifically. And then the big, there were some El Grecos I wanted to see. Yeah. So like I knew what I was looking for. And then there was like 100 other things I had to stop and glance at on my way. But I do remember sneakily taking pictures of Garden of Earthly Delights, because they weren't. May or may not have done the same. I do have a very, very fast selfie in front of it that I just did as quickly as I could when no one was watching.
Same with Las Meninas. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was the other one I wanted to see.
Yeah. And I got to walk around with some people and tell them about it. So I felt happy. So I came up and I was like, yeah, y'all stand guard. I'm going to snap some pictures. Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, we just admitted it. They're going to come after us.
They probably will.
will. Okay, so I think that this painting is amazing, and we had a good conversation about it. It might have been a little bit all over the place, but that's okay too. So for those of you listening, 2 things. If you want to travel and have these sort of powerful art experiences, we do take trips at Art Class Curator. If you go to artclasscurator.com/travel, our next trip is to Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand in June of 2022. Both. I'm so excited to go. We're both going. So, if you want to, at very least, hang out with us.
You totally want to hang out with us.
They're listening, so they obviously do, right?
Here's talking about a whole bunch of random stuff in art.
Yep. And then also that manifesto I mentioned, if you want to download that, you can go to artclasscurator.com/manifesto. And is there anything else? Oh, anything we talked about, like the show notes, the comics, the blog post I wrote about this, and we will put links to all of that in the show notes. So, and also this book I'm writing. If you want to get on the wait list to get that, you can go to artclasscurator.com/book, and you can get on our email list and be notified when that comes out. It's still a ways away, so don't expect that anytime soon. I've got maybe another year in it, but it will be.
It's going to be amazing.
It'll be good. I'm enjoying writing it. Sure am. Okay, so thank you so much for listening, and I will see you again next week. What's keeping you from showing more artwork to your students? Do you get stuck trying to choose a work of art, or do you fear your students will ask a question that you don't know the answer to? Have you tried to start a classroom art discussion but didn't know what to say or how to get your students talking? Are you worried you're going to spend a ton of time researching and planning a lesson that none of your students are interested in? That's why we created Beyond the Surface, a free professional development email series all about how to teach works of art through memorable activities and thoughtful classroom discussions. With Beyond the Surface, you'll discover how to choose artworks your students will connect with, and learn exactly what to say and do to spark engagement and create a lasting impact. Plus, you'll get everything you need to curate these powerful learning experiences without spending all of your time planning. Sign up to receive this free professional development email course at artclasscurator.com/surface. Thank you so much for listening to the Art Class Curator podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and give us an honest rating on iTunes to help other teachers find us and hear these amazing art conversations and art teacher insights. Be sure to tune in next week for more art inspiration and curated conversations.